Hello, and thank you for joining me. I brought you here because of all the construction projects I've ever done, this was the most complex. Not the most expensive, not the most difficult, but the most complex. And the reason is, we need a mason for the columns. We need an iron worker, fabricator for the gates proper, an electrician for the motors and the control system, and for good measure, if we're going to add cameras in the future, we should talk with the alarm company about what type of wiring would be required. And of course, the guy who's going to pay for all of it and has to be okay with it, I need to be there too. So that's an example of a good committee. A group of people coming together with, this is what I can do, this is what I need from everyone else to make it happen, working towards a common goal. All right? A very good example of this is the British Empire. And I'm not going to sanction colonialism or settlerism or any of the other isms in the world. I am going to say that pulling out of India as it was done, rush job, it was an absolute humanitarian disaster and very painful and awful. In the case of Kenya, against the Mau Mau, again, things got out of hand. It's unacceptable. It's a very painful thing. I'm a big fan of the Kenyan people. Kenya is one of the most beautiful countries I've ever been to, and so that's awful. But I am going to say that in terms of effectiveness, when it came to imperial policing as the empire spread out, and then collapsing the empire, never mind at wholesale prices, fire sale mode, the British did it really well. And they did it with committees. So at the national theater level, you're going to have the civil authority, supreme, because ultimately it is a political humanitarian issue, the military, police, civil sources such as engineering, whatever other assets are involved, because they need to work with a common purpose, they need to coordinate their efforts, they need to say, this is what we're bringing to the table, this is what we're trying to do as our piece of the puzzle, and at the same time, for other people to say, here's I can support this, and no, I can't do that thing you need me to do. And then at lower echelons, you're going to have a committee. You're going to have a committee with division and brigade and battalion levels at each echelon. Same thing, civilian, police, military, other elements coming together, common purpose. This is what we're doing. Here's how we're going to do it. These are our limitations. Here's how we're going to coordinate our efforts. Now let's go ahead and talk about some bad examples of committees, because many of us, myself included, are like, oh God, a committee, yay, fun. And one example of this was, I worked at a school and we were told, all right, everyone has to join a committee. So being a tech ed teacher, naturally I joined a technology committee. And on the very first day, a teacher came into the room and announced, the building principal put me in charge. We're going to buy PCs, because that's what the kids have at home. We're not having any new Macs in the school. Right? Now, I brought snacks, and we just need to organize who's going to bring the snacks for all the other meetings we're going to have. And so once a month, we get to go sit in a room and do nothing but have snacks. Right? There was no research. There was no coordinating with various programs and what do you need for your curriculum and what would you like to achieve with computers. There was no reaching out to parents about what do you actually have at home, and perhaps the parent might say, we have PCs at home. I'd like my child to learn how to use a Mac as well. That wasn't a consideration. One person made a decision and then the rest of it is just time suckage. Ugh. Another example of a non-positive committee experience. Another school, a high school, very large wing is being added on to the building. It's for science and technology, and then they're going to do a whole bunch of shuffling to allow for increased student enrollment, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. The wing isn't done yet, but it's close enough that even without a CO, fine, we're going to stop work so that the entire faculty, after the faculty meeting, can visit the new wing without having to wear a helmet, eye protection, vest and steel-capped shoes. And I'll tell you right now, I'm pretty environmentally tolerant. That is to say, smells, sights, other things don't bother me much. Ronelli. The linoleum floors, and I say this as someone who loves the color raspberry and enjoys raspberry sherbet in particular, were a raspberry color. And the natural sunlight coming in, hitting this raspberry color, oh boy, like I was even getting a headache, okay? And so right away it was announced, no, these floors are gonna be replaced. And then in the days that followed, we learned about a design committee, architecture committee, I forget the title of it, that they had decided on that color of tile. And never heard of this committee before. And I was pretty new there, but I was dialed in some people who'd been around quite a while, and they were like, design committee, that was the word for it. And it was a diffusion of responsibility. I don't even know this committee existed. I never met anyone who said, yeah, I belong to the committee, and we looked at one raspberry tile, looked really nice, and it's similar to the school color, so why not? That may have been the case. It may also have been an interior designer or an architect or whoever, or maybe the company doing the work was like, we've got all these leftover raspberry tiles, let's offload them. No idea. But it's an example of using a committee to diffuse responsibility. And as someone who believes that responsibility is extremely important, yeah, I'm not okay with that. Another high school, another committee, attendance committee. What it really was this. Students would run afoul of the attendance policy of the school, and we teachers would fill out the relevant paperwork, exceed absences allowed, and and turn it in. And then a few days later we'd get credit restored, 0-day extension or whatever, without any explanation. The other thing would happen as a teacher is you'd be assigned to this committee, and after the buses had left, you'd go into the administrator's office, they would tell you what the decision was, and then the student could make their case, but then we were compelled to sign off on this thing. The administrator's making the choice. We're just there, it's like some kind of deniability. What? We all knew it was nonsense. It was dumb. If you're going to make a decision, make the decision. Don't generate a committee so you can say, I did not act it alone. Yeah, you did. And I would testify under oath to that. So I'd like to share with you some tips on running committee meetings and the like. Years ago, I used to be involved in something called the community management team. And it's a terrible name for a good idea. If we called it community liaison teams or something like that, it'd be a much better choice. Whichever, whatever. Once a month, we used to, ours were as police substation because originally this was started by the police as part of a community policing program. But the police would make a report, Livable Cities Initiative, other city organizations might present. If you were a concerned citizen with an issue, this was a place to be heard. If you were maybe a builder or a business and you wanted a zoning variance, or you wanted to let folks who were new in town and come visit us, this would be a good way to reach out to the community. So it's a positive thing in general. But as a wise man explained to me, people who grow up in very structured, calm environments can do structured, calm meetings. People who grow up in chaotic, also kinetic, unfortunately, chaotic communities, chaotic households, they have a need for chaotic meetings. It's not just they may not have learned Robert's Rules of Orders, it's just this is how they roll, okay? All right, but we gotta get things done here. So how do we herd cats? How do we make things happen? Have a printed agenda, put time hacks on it. We have 3 minutes for this thing, 5 for that because it's a big deal, and then back to 3, maybe 10, whatever it is, but like absolute time cap. And then add a rule, we can return after the regular meeting to any topic anyone wants to discuss. And the thing of human nature is, when you stand up and you have an audience in the middle of the meeting, like that's a power, right? And most of us do not feel listened to. So it's a big deal. But generally speaking, once the meeting is done and people are dispersing, no one wants to stick around. So the person is there to hear the sound of their own voice, who's looking for the captive audience. That ability to say, no, we're done, we're moving on. You can come back to this later at the end of the meeting. Very effective. Another very effective technique this may or may not apply to you all, is a rule we learned to do it this way. Unless you're on the agenda, if you wish to speak, you remain seated. When people are able to stand up, they can see their audience, the audience can see them, they can act more, and there's a physical domination from being up high. If they're compelled to stay in their seat, they lose that, right? And that helps us move things along. I never got there. It's a story of my life, things not yet done. But I actually bought stand glass, egg timer type things, and I was going to make a rack. I had 3, 5, and 10-minute versions, and we could put labels for each of the items. So not only do we have a paper agenda with time hacks, we literally could, and now we're discussing this, and when the sand runs out, we're done, next item, and move things along in that very visual, structured way that we can give people. I would go to some of the other neighborhoods meetings myself, and people would come to ours. And there was this one guy, to be honest, he was a jerk. And he wanted to discuss something that was sort of police related regarding his district and all that. And as the then chair, I said to him, well, we're done with this now, we're moving on, there's the agenda. And he's like, well, if you don't let me talk, I'll leave. Okay, I'm not leaving. You gotta figure out the way to keep things structured, to let people have a voice, but at the same time, not let things get out of hand. I'd like to make a couple Scouting Pacific suggestions, and one of them is many troops, the senior patrol leader will be elected and then designs the program for next year, and the senior scouts are forming kind of a committee. But a lot of times the senior patrol leader just shows up maybe with the assistant senior and says, and here's what we're doing this year. I'm going to suggest that maybe it would be a good idea to task every primary leadership council member bring a camping trip or other activity planned out to the meeting, and everyone sort of drops on the table, rather than have a bunch of information that these kids could theoretically go to, maps, campsite catalogs, if you will, that sort of thing. Instead, have them like kind of pre-planned. Your troop is going to have a committee, and I think that's a very good thing as a rule. But may I make a suggestion? 1 camping trip, 1 complaint. 2 camping trips, 2 complaints. What I'm on about is we often find the parents who never show or hardly ever show, who treat scouting like a drop-off activity, are the ones who come to the committee meeting to complain about something. Why isn't my son getting Eagle? Why not this? What about that? Right? We had the same thing in the community management team meetings. We'd have people who never showed before. They try and kind of dominate the meeting, talk about things that had already been talked about, or whatever the case may be, and you'd never see them again. And it wouldn't be okay to do, so we didn't, but it would have been nice to say, you can't have the floor until your second meeting. And I seriously would suggest to you, as a troop, have a rule. You are allowed to come with an issue proportionate to the contribution you make. Okay? Everyone can have a voice, but if you're not going on camping trips, if you're not driving kids on camping trips, if you're not taking on a role in the committee that involves real work and you're getting that work done, then this is your weight. Because as stakeholders, like, great that your son or daughter or multiple children are in the troop, that really does matter. And you are a parent, you are a stakeholder, we will listen to you. But at the same time, is it really fair to the adults who put in a lot of work and make things happen that you get to pop in and say, give me special accommodations, special privileges, and you're not really putting in the effort? And I would say no. And we can incentivize, I believe, participation by saying the accommodation is relative to the investment. Okay, that's just my opinion. And that brings me to the disclaimer I probably should have had at the beginning. I'm wearing a scout sweatshirt. I'm talking to scouting issues, and I also believe this has relevance outside of scouting. But these opinions are mine. They're not Scouting USA's, they're not any troops, they're not any council or district or any other organization. So in a video about committees where one of my through lines is the importance of responsibility and not using committee to evade it, but instead running committees in a responsible way and letting people be effective stakeholders. The opinions are mine alone. Okay, thank you very much for joining me. Second time I shot this video because when I shot it yesterday, it was out of focus. And so I hope this was helpful to you. If not, there are no refunds. Comment sections down below. Thank you for joining us.